Hey, Craig Howard here again, talking to the kids from Camp Galilee. This is the videos that I'm going to be putting up specifically for Camp Galilee. They're going to be a little bit longer, and I hope they're helpful to you. These are also the ones that are going to be on YouTube from now on, so they're going to be a little bit longer. But anyhow, I want you to think about something. We're having Bible school this week at my church, at Break Church of the Brethren, and last night we studied the book of Daniel with the kids. Not the whole book. We studied the life of Daniel, specifically Daniel's little stint in the lion's den. And as I thought about that last night after Bible school, I got my Bible out and I began to read more about that event and read through it a little bit more and a little further. And I realized something very, very significant happened. You know, there are times in our life when we're all put in situations that we have to make some hard choices, and that's what happened to Daniel. If you know the story of Daniel, you know that Daniel was hated by some of the king's followers, some of the king's leaders, or not leaders, but some of the king's advisors, because Daniel had found a point of great favor with the king and had been exalted by the king. And he sat in a position of tremendous favor with the king, and these other men were jealous of it. And so they conspired to trick the king into writing a decree that was written under the guidelines of a decree of the Medes and the Persians. Back then, if a decree went out and it was a decree under the law of the Medes and the Persians, even the king could not change that law. Even though the king decreed the law, he himself was not able to change it. And so they tricked the king. They played to his vanity. And boy, this is something we could take a lesson from. Be careful when things are playing to our vanity. When people are playing to our vanity, telling us how wonderful we are and how nice we are and how good looking we are and all that kind of stuff. I don't hear the good looking part much anymore. But you know, people when people play to your vanity, you never know sometimes, are they being sincere? Are they not? Are they wanting something for themselves? Well, what happened in this case is they wanted the king to make a decree that nobody could pray to anybody but the king for the next 30 days, because they knew that Daniel would pray to his God. They knew how devout Daniel was. So they tricked the king into writing that decree. And then the Bible tells us that Daniel, after he had heard that the decree was written, says in Daniel chapter 6 verse 10, now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he knew the decree was signed, that nobody was to pray to anybody but the king for the next 30 days, he went home, and in his upper room with his window open toward Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before God, as was his custom since early days. A couple lessons here that are just sort of a side note. We sometimes think it's difficult to have a quiet time with God. We sometimes think it's difficult to find time to pray with God. I'm glad you're watching this devotional today. It means you've taken a little time out of your schedule today to make time for God. But Daniel knew that making time for God was going to possibly cost him his life, but he made that time anyhow. Of course, you know the rest of the story. Daniel was arrested. He was thrown in the lion's den. The king was distraught over it. The king spent the whole night fasting and praying that Daniel's God could deliver him from the lions. The next morning when he came and found Daniel alive, he was beside himself. He had prayed all night. He had fasted all night, hoping and praying that Daniel's God could deliver him, but he really didn't believe. He wasn't sure that it would happen. And you know what I'll bet? I'll bet Daniel wasn't sure it was going to happen either. Sometimes when we're asked to do the right thing, the consequences may cost us. It's not always easy to do the right thing. It's not always comfortable to do the right thing. Sometimes you have to make a choice between pleasing your friends and doing the right thing. Sometimes you have to make a choice between having fun and doing the right thing. Sometimes those choices are hard. But Daniel made that choice, and he was willing to pay the price. He was willing to trust that God was going to deliver him, but if God didn't deliver him, he was okay with that too, because he was going to honor God with his life or with his death. Well, he made his decision, and God delivered him. God sent an angel, shut the mouth of the lions. King comes the next morning. Daniel's alive. He takes him out. He deals with the men that had tricked him. You know, sometimes tricking people, sometimes manipulating people comes back to haunt you. These men and their families and children and everybody got thrown into the lion's den. They were all killed. Not only did those men pay the price, their families paid the price. It's an important lesson to remember. But something else amazing happened. Because Daniel honored God, because Daniel did the right thing, he knew what the will of God was. He knew that he couldn't dishonor God by praying to a king instead of to God. Because Daniel was faithful, an entire empire was changed. The next decree that the king wrote, he sent out to all the land. And I want you to hear what he said. I should have had it ready. It says the king gave a command, and they brought. Here we go. Here was the command to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth. At this time, this was the biggest empire on the earth. Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom, men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. Who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions? And then it goes on to say, so Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius, and in the reign of Darius the Persian. An entire kingdom, an entire empire was transformed, was changed its pattern of worship, came to recognize the God of Daniel as the true and living God, because Daniel stood for what was right instead of taking the easy road, because Daniel chose to honor God instead of taking the easy road. I want you to think about that. Campers, if you're watching this, please think about this. You're going to have to make a lot of hard choices, and whether you're a camper or not, you are going to, through your life, have to make a lot of hard choices. And the easy choice is going to be to do that thing which you want to do, which is going to be best for you. You're going to want to look out for yourself. But that's not going to be the road that usually makes the biggest difference. We live in a world, we live in a society that is very self-centered. And people are willing to lie to look out for themselves. They're willing to steal from others to look out for themselves. They're willing to manipulate people to look out for themselves. They're willing to even hurt other people so they get what they want, to look out for themselves. That's not the kind of person you want to be. That's not the kind of person that changes the world. Everybody's heard of Billy Graham. Billy Graham just started out as a simple itinerant preacher, just a simple preacher that would go around and hold revival meetings. His revival meetings grew from taking place in little churches to taking place in large tents to taking place in football stadiums. He traveled all over the world. He spoke to kings and presidents and some of the top leaders of the world and gave them counsel. Many of our own presidents would call Billy Graham in times of crisis just so he could pray with them. But he never looked out for himself. He wasn't about taking care of himself. He was about one thing, and that was honoring God in everything that he did. I want you to think about that. My time is up. But to the campers of Camp Galilee, who I'm sending this out to, but to whoever may be watching this on YouTube, know that honoring God will always pay good dividends. It might be hard, and in the short term, it might even cause you some pain or some stress. But in the end, because you've honored God, your life will be touched, and you will manage to touch the lives of other people. Well, my time is gone. I hope you have a great day. Not a cloud in the sky here above my head here in West Virginia today. I hope you have a beautiful day as well. I'll talk to you tomorrow. God bless you. Do right.